And one of the major things that carb cycling does when you bring up glucose levels, it quells stress hormones. And we've talked about that in other videos. Stress hormones are not something that anybody wants in an abundance. We need some cortisol. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning. But over dieting, overtraining will ramp up cortisol. The only way that
adds to the weight around the center of your body, right? If you're thinking about trying out some carb cycling, you don't have to go all out week 1. Try a day or 2 and see how that works for you 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. And then after a month of doing it, maybe you try 4 days. If you work your way up to that 5th day, whatever it is, but don't go all in right away, blow yourself out, realize you can't do it, and then just give up, right? Try it for 2 days, 3 days, and see how that works. Carb cycling. We're just getting right into it. I think this is important for people because, we had our episode last week about getting in shape for the summer. There's still time to do it. And carb cycling, if people don't know what that is, can be a really effective way to, I don't want to say trick or hack, but to change your metabolism to get a better effect out of what you're eating, right?
Absolutely. I used to call it the zigzag approach.
Okay.
It's a great strategy. It's something I always use. And it could be used for weight loss, but it could also be used for muscle building as well. And it's a great strategy for you not to lose your mind.
Right.
That's one of my favorite. I mean, scientifically it works, and we'll get into why people may want to try to adopt this way of dieting or eating.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be done all the time. That's the great thing too. You can do it for a few weeks, you can do it for a few months, you can do it all the time. But it's a real great way so you don't lose your mind from what I call diet burnout.
Sure. All right, well, tell us, what is carb cycling?
Carb cycling is going to be just basically taking the amount of carbohydrates that your body needs, and that's going to be different for everybody, whether the goal, the gender, the sport, and you're going to pick, generally what we do is we pick a baseline, and then we have high days, medium days, and low days. And it's basically these, and there's many different ways you can do it. It's a cycling of high days, low days, and medium days, and it could be structured a bunch of different ways.
Which is changing the amount of insulin your body is producing, right?
That's correct. So the higher carb days are going to be, there's going to be more insulin production. And insulin, fitness industry is very funny in that, if something is good, then we must need a bunch of it, and something like vitamin D, you need vitamin D, but if you took tons of vitamin D, it could actually be deadly and toxic because it's fat soluble. Low vitamin D levels are bad. So carbs are good for energy, glycogen replenishment, and insulin, although it's demonized, Nick. We need insulin. We would be dead without insulin. And insulin can, done right or utilized right or timed right, can be very anabolic and can be a major strategy to build muscle. Having low insulin levels for too long of a period of time could actually be detrimental to the body and your energy levels and your muscle growth and stuff like that. So yes, by managing carbohydrates, you're managing the amount of glycogen that's in the muscle.
Because it's spiking the glycogen, but then also depleting the glycogen as well, right?
Well, you don't necessarily spike glycogen.
Or building up.
You're filling up your glycogen. Okay.
Yeah.
But when you fill glycogen, you were right in the fact that you're spiking insulin.
Okay.
And the spike of the insulin, Nick, insulin is the gatekeeper. So what insulin does is it opens up all the cells in the body, fat cells, but also muscle cells. And that spike of insulin that you said shuttles the glucose into the cell that fills the glycogen. It's a little tricky in the way the wording, but yes. And what you're also doing is you're managing calories, of course, 4 calories per gram on carbohydrates. So obviously on a day that you have 300 grams of carbohydrates, let's say somebody was eating that on a medium day or a high day, depending on the person, and you go down to 100 for 2 days, well, do the math. You're on a calorie deficit. So you're managing insulin, you're lowering the glycogen in your muscle, which is conducive to burning body fat.
Muscle glycogen.
They might not know what that is, Nick, and because I'm going on vacation, there's actually coffee. Tell them quick. for the
So
people.
a couple episodes ago, we mentioned that the drinking game on the show is whenever Mike says muscle glycogen, we have to have a sip. I'm doing black coffee today, so no alcohol for me, but whatever you're drinking today, muscle glycogen.
Yeah, take a sip. I actually have coffee today too, so I'm drying out, as they say. I'm blue cycling.
All right.
So you're managing calories, you're playing with the glycogen levels, high, low days, but you're also managing insulin, which is very important for body fat burning. And also when you spike insulin, it's conducive to muscle growth. So there's a lot of benefits to carb cycling.
And also giving yourself those high carb days, and I want to call it a cheat day because it's different, right? But these high carb days, they can be like psychologically satisfying too, because you get to, you're not just living in that world where you can't eat bread, you can't have pasta, you can't have anything. You have a few days where you're really restricting yourself, and then you come right back and you live like your normal diet a little more in a couple days, right?
And that's why I said it's one of my favorite strategies, because you're not on what I call the low carb island for the rest of your life.
Which is not sustainable.
Yeah. So carb cycling is exactly what you're saying. It's your days, and you actually look forward to it. And it can be done, Nick, what you said, in a cheat day, or it can just be a bolus of healthy carbohydrate. It can be done both ways.
And it also helps to prevent the metabolic adaptation that happens, right? Because you can plateau when all you're doing is one thing. If you're only taking the carbs out, your metabolism gets used to whatever you're doing, and you'll plateau in terms of your weight loss or your muscle gain or anything like that, right?
I'm so glad you said that, because when it comes to the metabolism adapting negatively, the best strategy is bolusing calories, and no calories are going to reset the thyroid and the pituitary gland and the metabolism the way carbohydrates will, Nick. So you can bolus up or take a large amount of more protein, and not that that would be a bad thing, provided you had no kidney problems or anything.
Sure.
Fat bolusing or fat loading is probably not a great idea for anybody, I don't believe, at least.
Yeah.
But nothing undoes the dieting mess the way glucose does.
Right.
One of the major things that carb cycling does, when you bring up glucose levels, it quells stress hormones. And we've talked about that in other videos. Stress hormones are not something that anybody wants in an abundance. We need some cortisol. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning. But over dieting, overtraining will ramp up cortisol. The only way that
Adds to the weight around the center of your body, right?
Yes, the visceral fat. And the best way to turn down cortisol, I think, is booze, but no, sorry, Ma, is glucose. Glucose, end of story. Extra protein.
Exercise can help relieve some of the cortisol, right?
Right, yeah,
Stressing.
yes, it can, but too much exercise actually, so when you train hard,
Yeah.
as the session grows in length of time, that's why I'm not into these marathon workouts. I tell people, warm up, train hard, and get out. Because after about 40, 45 minutes, unless you're bogged down with a ton of steroids and growth hormone and stuff like that, but the average listener, stress is stress. So your body can take a certain amount of stress, but after a while, cortisol levels will increase. The best way to bring those cortisol levels back down is through glucose. So when people are on low carb diets for long periods of time, they can actually measure cortisol, fasted cortisol levels. They'll see a rise in cortisol levels in their blood if they wanted to test it. So let's say somebody was eating 300 grams of carbohydrates, they went to Quest, checked their fasted cortisol levels, wherever it was. If they trained hard and stayed really low carb for a long period of time, and they went, more than likely, not always, everybody's different, there's outliers, but their cortisol levels will start to increase. A way to push that down is glucose refeeds.
Okay. Now, for carb cycling, what are we looking at in terms of the scheduling of it, right? Is it, I know there's like one way to look at it where it's we have carbs on the weekends and you're low carb during the week, or some people are doing it 3 days on, 1 day off. Some people time it with workouts. Do you have a preference of that, or am I right on all of those?
You're right on all of them. It's going to really be what is the goal, right? So some strategies are, if somebody's really overweight, okay, and they want to lose a lot of weight, like we talked about last week and getting ready for the summer, they can push 5 days, 6 days, and then a carb cycle of 1 day in a week. Okay, that's going to be on the high end as far as pushing those low carbs. Okay, and that really is where you're white knuckling it. Like, so if you start, yeah, Sunday's easy, like say somebody carbs up on a Saturday, Sunday's obviously the easiest, and each day that you're digging a deeper inroad into those glucose stores, i.e. muscle glycogen, by Thursday, Friday, your body's going to really start screaming for those carbohydrates.
Yeah.
Now that's going to be on the extreme end.
Okay.
And then you can do strategies like where it's like midweek, and maybe you do like a hard leg workout on a Wednesday and Saturday. So it's like 5 days low, 2 days high.
Because the carbs are going to give you some energy for those workouts.
They're going to give you energy for the workouts. They're going to refill in the spent muscle glycogen, but they're going to also facilitate in the recovery process, and they're going to, by default, you're zigzagging your calories. So it's going to give you high calorie. Let's say protein is equated for and fat's equated for, and the only variability is carbohydrates. You're going to have higher and lower days.
Right.
So what I like to do to answer, because you asked a bunch of questions there, and they were all great questions, is I like to have the carb ups on either the day before a hard workout,
Okay.
like back and legs are really challenging, right? Or the day of. And really, to be honest with you,
I guess it depends on when you work out, because you're not going to have a huge carb. If you're working out at 6 a.m.,
right,
you're not getting up at 3:30 in the morning to carb up before that workout.
exactly right. And there's a strategy, or not a strategy, is a thought, and I believe it to be true, is today's nutrition fuels tomorrow's workout. So now if you wake up and eat something beforehand, you're still getting glucose in your blood system, and it's going to make you, focus for that.
But it hasn't gotten all the way through your
You
system
know,
yet.
if glycogen replenishment takes time. So in other words, so like let's say you're doing a hard leg workout on Wednesday. If you did a very high carb day Tuesday, now you probably are exercising, but it might be, something light or some cardio. You're topping off your carbohydrate tank for tomorrow's brutal assault. Now that's going to be for somebody, in my mind, that wants to maximize muscle growth. Now the opposing, or the total opposite, as a low day, white knuckle it and crank out a hard workout in a depleted state. Now you're going to combust more body fat. Once that workout is over, Nick, now we're into the restocking. Now that, if you think about your body or your glycogen stores as a sponge, and it's all wrung out.
Yeah.
And now your body's at a very heightened state. When you train for a few hours afterwards, your body doesn't use much insulin at all. There's a little insulin response. But so in other words, if I give you a bowl of pasta just sitting here, you would have X amount of insulin. If me and you went into the gym and did 10 sets of 10 volume training on squats, and then I gave you a bowl of pasta, that same bowl of pasta, the insulin output's going to be a Tic Tac in a whale's mouth. It's going to be this much. So now you get all the same carbohydrates, Nick, without all that insulin. Okay. So that's that strategy. So I would say that that's another way. Think about what your goal is. If you want to maximize muscle growth without getting fat, carbohydrates before, the day before, or all day long before if you're training at nighttime. And if you're trying to maximize fat burning, think about really wringing out that carbohydrate tank and then refueling it, as we talk about the term earn those carbohydrates. Okay. And lastly, Nick, you can do it like something easy where it's a low day, a medium day, or a high day. So it's like, or you could do 3 days low. And there's really, in my mind, there's no one way that works. They all work. You really just have to know. And I'm sure we'll get questions, and maybe somebody will say, hey, I'm doing this, and we can answer as the questions come in, very specific, and then people will have reference points. But there's different ways you can do it, and they all pretty much work. You could do a high day, low day, a high day, low day. Obviously, the more aggressive you get with the carbohydrate reduction, the more restrictive you'll be in your calories, there'll be less insulin, and you'll combust more body fat.
Now, let me ask you this. When we're saying carb cycling, are we saying no carbs on the days, or we're just saying low carbs?
You could do no carbs. You could do no carbs.
Does it work with both though? Like if you have a little bit of carbs, but you're just not going crazy with the carbs, is that technically like a low carb day? Does that do the cycling?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if somebody's having vegetables, there's still carbohydrates in there, so they're not doing no carbs. The only way that you would be doing no carbs is if you're doing a protein, what they call. I hate when people call it a protein fast, because that people have come up with all these terms to make themselves sound important and smart.
Sure.
If you eat protein, you're not fasting. So, but if you're eating like a carnivorous diet where you're just eating meat, but you know, there's some glycogen in red meat, you know, so and your body can combust protein into, it's called gluconeogenesis. It's a Greek term for new glucose. So even if you ate enough protein, your body will to convert some of those amino acids into glucose.
Because it needs the glucose.
Yes. But if you, let's say you just ate chicken and steak and turkey and eggs and protein drinks and just had a few green vegetables here and there, I mean, with the fiber and the digestion, you're pretty close to zero to begin with. And the more aggressive you get with that reduction, because anything in my mind is low as anything than 120 grams of carbohydrates and lower, okay? Because the brain has a, you know, some people will debate this, but there's a demand that the body needs, though the brain needs, of 120 grams of glucose at a minimum per day to function properly. Now, if somebody's in a ketogenic diet or they're in ketosis for medical reasons, or they just like that style of dieting, the body will convert ketone bodies and use that to fuel the brain. But most people are eating carbohydrates on some level, and the brain has been shown to need about 120 to 130 grams of glucose. So anything that's...
Can you give me a reference point for that? Like what is 120 grams of carbohydrates or glucose?
So to get to 100, you would need like a cup of cooked rice, an apple, and maybe 2 cups of broccoli would get you about 100.
Okay.
About 50 grams of carbs in a cup of cooked rice, about 25 to 30 grams in an apple, and about 20 grams or so in a cup, 2 cups of cooked broccoli.
Okay.
A bagel is about 50 grams. A nice big sweet potato is about 50 grams. Most fruits are somewhere around the 20, 30 mark for a cup or a piece of fruit. So right around there, it's not no carbs, but it's on the lower end. So anything, the lower you push that carb down, like if you get those carbs down to 20, 30 grams a day, you're gonna really suppress those insulin levels down. It's not the carbs so much, Nick, it's what the carbs aren't doing.
Yeah.
Like push. Now that insulin level, now if you do that 2 or 3 days a week, that adds up over time.
Sure.
That adds up in lack of calories, and also now you're keeping those insulin levels real low.
And again, just like we always say, if you're thinking about trying out some carb cycling, you don't have to go all out week 1. Try a day or 2 and see how that works for you 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Right.
And then after a month of doing it, maybe you try 4 days. If you work your way up to that 5th day, whatever it is, but don't go all in right away, blow yourself out, realize you can't do it, and then just give up, right? Try it for 2 days, 3 days, and see how that works.
Yes, that's a great point. And the other thing too, Nick, is it's not only just the days, it's the amount. Let's say on average, somebody's eating about 300-400 grams of carbs every single day. And they're like, all right, I want to try this.
Cut it in half.
Cut it in half. You know, take it from 400 to 300. You still reduce, take it from 300 to 250.
Just take bread out of breakfast, right? Just take bread out of breakfast and lunch or whatever it is, right? Because there are times in my life where I was eating bread with every meal.
Really?
Yeah, every meal. It would be bacon, egg, and cheese for breakfast. It would be a big hoagie sandwich for lunch or a sub or something like that. And then dinner would be something else, breaded or something like that. Like it's easy to do because carbs are cheap, right? Especially when you're young, but if you're just like, you got to get quick meals and all this different stuff, there are definitely people out there who are eating carbs with every meal.
Wow.
Easy.
Yeah, that's a lot of bread.
Easy. So just take it out of one meal.
Right.
Start with that, right? Breakfast, no carbs. Try it.
And so that brings up another great point, Nick. You can remove it in a meal, or you can just reduce it in every meal. It all comes out the same, okay? So some people may not feel good taking out all the carbs in in a meal. They might feel like shit for the next few hours. So let's say, for easy math, someone's eating 60 grams of carbohydrates at 3 meals. They might want to just knock it down to 30 per meal. Or they can do what you just said, is do 60 and 60 in 2 meals and 0 or very little in 1 meal. Everybody is different, and so here's the thing, Nick, and a lot of times people get this wrong. There are no fixes or solutions in fitness and nutrition. There's only trade-offs, okay? And anybody that says this is gonna fix everything, they don't know what they're doing, they got something to sell. You don't wanna lower your carbs to suppress your insulin to a point where now your training sucks. And now you're not recovering.
Because you got no energy, you got no motivation.
Yeah. You have no muscle glycogen, you know, your hormones are your stress hormones are high, your sex hormones are low, but I'm keeping my insulin levels low. But now, instead of doing 15 reps on the squat, you're only getting 10. And that's only 1 set. And this is where people get so lost in the weeds, okay? You gotta look at all the tools and manage them. What good is it that keeping your insulin levels low because you went low carb because some idiot online said you gotta do it for 3 days straight, but 2 days you missed your workouts because you couldn't get out of bed because you were exhausted. Now what are you doing? So, and now carbohydrate cycling is to manage that insulin and manage calories. But I got news for you. Know what really lowers insulin? Training.
Strength training.
Strength training and high intensity interval training, cardio. So people will be pushing, oh, that's going to do that. Yeah, but training. So now you have less fuel in your body and your training sucks. You're training on a 6 level. And and then people will say, you know, when I eat carbs, I train so much better. Yeah, of course you do. Because glucose is energy. Glucose facilitates recovery. You know, it keeps your thyroid functioning good. Your brain needs glucose. Yeah. So these are tools. Carbohydrate cycling is a great strategy, but it's just one tool. And if you see that it starts to constipate you, or again, we've talked about this a lot of times, you start getting cold extremities, these are all signs that your body is not getting enough energy, okay? And carbohydrates are energy.
Yeah. So for the days that we're going high carb in this carb cycling, just hit me with a couple healthy carbs that we can be putting into our diet so we're not just saying like the bacon, egg, and cheese, right?
My top picks are oats, gluten-free. I like gluten-free oats, oat bran, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, red skin potatoes, beans and lentils. If you can, I know they're protein, but they're mostly carbohydrate and fiber. If you can digest and assimilate those are great. If you like the way it tastes, quinoa, you know, squash, the squash family, anything like that. And then you have the intermediate stuff that's like not starchy, but it's not green vegetables. And again, those are going to be the squash family, the pumpkin family, parsnips and stuff like that. And the root vegetables, carrots, you know, carrots, if they're cooked, they become more
which is why we're saying that these are not cheat days. These are just high carb days, right? You can still have your cheat day. You can still have your pasta or your pizza on the weekend or whatever it's going to be, your breads and things like that.
Taco shells and all that.
Right.
That's a carb load too, but that's more of the enjoyment, diet break mindset carbohydrates. Yes. But from clean quality carbohydrates, those are going to be the top picks. Your quality starch, non-GMO organic corn, I don't mind, or grits and stuff like that. Rice, black rice. You know, with rice, you have to be a little bit mindful with the brown rice and stuff because of the arsenic levels, but organic basmati white rice is really good, and any products from them. I like to get people in the habit of eating them in their whole form.
Right.
But if somebody wants some cream of white rice cereal and it's good on their digestion tract, because the problem sometimes too, Nick, and this is another thing that you just made me think of while we're talking about this, a problem of restriction of any food, what they call food stuff, is you lose the enzymatic properties to digest them. So when you stay away, like a lot of times people will call me or contact me and they've been on a low carb diet for a long period of time and they put carbs back in, I put carbs back in their diet. They're like, oh, it doesn't work for me. I'm getting reactive hypoglycemia, or I feel exhausted, whatever. I'm like, yeah, because you've trained your body not to know how to handle those.
But can you work it back in?
You can, but you have to give your body time to adjust. Unless you have diabetes and you're like, your beta cells in your pancreas are totally burnt out and you're training hard, but in the beginning, your body might freak the hell out. Some people have been on low-carb diets for 2, 3 years, and now they put some carbs back in the diet because they listen to, you know, hey, this is good for athleticism, and they put it in, and their blood sugars are all over the place, or they feel exhausted and they're crashing because their bodies just don't know how to handle it anymore.
Sure.
That being said, when you can, try to get it in its real form, a sweet potato, a baked potato, whole grain, you know, oats, whole grain rice, quinoa, not floured, pulvered down, grinded up carbohydrates, because that's going to give you the big spike that you talked about before and the letdown.
Now, what about differences between men and women? Are there any special concerns for women when it comes to carb cycling that they should know about?
Yeah. Women suffer more from the stressful characteristic traits of over dieting. So I think that because I see that women, their thyroids aren't as hardy as men's, so they can get the slow thyroid from over dieting. And there's no better way to lower your thyroid than, which no one wants to do, by the way, is low calories, too much cardio, and too few carbohydrates. So for women, this is really like, this can be a problem, and again, really screws up that menstrual cycle and stuff like that, which causes a cascade of problems, right? So carbohydrate restriction can really damage a woman's sex hormones and really damage that thyroid, or make it go into what's called hibernation syndrome, where they're actually, without knowing it, they're lowering their own hormone function, which...
So maybe for women, they're just dealing with like less time in between. So one day of low carb, maybe 2 days, and then go back to some carbs. Don't push it for the week. Don't go crazy with, and I guess that works for ketogenic diets too with women.
Well, yes, you have what's called secular ketogenic diets, and that's, I think if someone's going to go on a ketogenic diet and they don't suffer from epilepsy, because that's what ketogenic diets were originally designed for, and I don't even know if they still realize or truly know why it helps people with epilepsy, but when they put people on a ketogenic diet, and a real ketogenic diet, like 80% fat and like 20%, I don't know, 15% protein and like 5% carbohydrates. It's a it's a diet that no one would really want to do, but they saw like a huge reduction in these people's epileptic fits. So it's therapeutic, but no one really wants to live on an 80% fat diet. It's basically, you're just eating oils and butters, and it's just not a place most people want to be. But if somebody likes a ketogenic diet and that's their jam and they're athletic, cycling out for a day, a half a day, where they get a bolus of carbohydrates, can help mitigate the detrimental aspects that come with low-carb dieting. Give them something to look forward that you talk to. Make sure that thyroid, and make sure that they don't lose the ability to handle glucose. So that's a way, and that's an athletic way of doing the ketogenic diet. So yeah, but men have all the same problems. I just feel like when it's dieting and really screwing with your body and being restrictive, women seem to fare a little worse than men.
Now, what about age-related considerations? You know, for carb cycling, I'm assuming it's different if you're in your 20s than it is in your 50s or 60s, or maybe not.
Again, going to go to that hormone as we get older, where our hormones, Father Time is taking our hormones from us. So we don't want to be too restrictive, because that can supercharge hormone downregulation. And also too, now that you asked that question, Nick, a problem with age is digestion and motility, intestinal motility. A lot of elderly or older people run into constipation problems. So with carbohydrates there's fiber, and a good thyroid, one of the classic signs of slow thyroid is constipation. So I think that somebody who's older has to be mindful of not being too restrictive in their carbohydrates, provided they're not diabetic, because they're going to lower their fiber intake. Now, they could offset that with a fiber supplement. Most people aren't going to do that, but they run the risk of supercharging hormone downregulation, which no one wants to do. And they can run into constipation problems. And look, I don't want to get slayed on this, but I think this makes sense, that there's a correlation with constipation and colon cancer. And colon cancer,
Because you're just keeping all that poison in your body for long periods of time.
yeah. And if you get constipation and you strain, you can make little fissures, cuts, and this is you can increase the risk of intestinal permeability, where foodstuffs are getting actually into the wall of the intestine. Now the immune system has to go in and fight that.
Let me tell you something right now. Just a few months ago, I started having figs every day, and it has turned my whole world around. So let me just do a quick promo for figs. They're amazing, they taste great, and they really loosen you up. I mean, it is the best thing I've ever done for myself. I'm telling everybody, eat a couple figs a day.
Really?
Yeah.
For the elderly, to your question, Nick, is make sure you're eating figs. And yeah, I can see that could become a problem, and you do not want to get constipated. And
Is that something where you would, if you had to, like, add some Metamucil in there or something, or add like one of the drinks that you can have?
yeah, so Metamucil is the actual brand name, right? So psyllium husk is actually what's in Metamucil. This is, and we should do a deep dive on fiber, but if they're going to do that, I would like them to maybe spend the extra buck or two and get organic, because psyllium is sprayed a lot.
Oh,
so
okay.
we don't want a lot of glyphosate in our intestinal tract.
Sure.
So yeah, but you know, look, in carbohydrates, lots of vitamins, minerals, and micronutrients. So, you know, as we're aging, we're uncoupling. So, you know, thinking outside the box, that was a great question, because, you know, you don't want to be deficient in certain nutrients to lose an extra pound of body fat.
Yeah.
I think it's a stupid trade-off. Again, remember, there's no fixes, there's just trade-offs. So as far as the elderly goes, I wouldn't be too aggressive, provided they don't have a ton of weight to lose, because of the constipation issue. And if you're backed up, by the way, that raises estrogen, and high estrogen levels can open you up to certain types of cancer. So, and just a slow thyroid, you know, is a problem. So not being too aggressive in the elderly or the older folk.
If it is working, if people try the carb cycling, what positive effects will they be seeing from this carb cycling?
Okay, from a visual standpoint, they're definitely going to see body fat reduction, especially in the central adiposity, that abdominal fat, or the love handles, because listen, we get fat everywhere, but women tend to be more estrogen dominant, and they're going to be holding more body fat on average in the lower legs and their butt and their hips. And unfortunately, no body fat it's all unsightly to us, but body fat in the hips and the legs is not as deadly as central located adiposity. So if somebody manages the amount of carbohydrates they eat and their insulins recede, they will see, or they should see, a reduction in the waist circumference, which is a very, very healthy thing. In fact, I know there's certain insurance companies, Nick, that actually will base your premium on your waist size.
Is that right?
Yes, because it's like one of the first things they go, like, there's a strong correlation with each inch there's a formula for it. There's actually an actual job. They're called actuaries. And what these people do is they figure out mathematically whose premium is going to be what, based on certain markers, because on average, these people die at X amount of age. And people with the bigger waist size to height ratio, their premiums go up, because their death rates, they're a liability. So by you reducing your insulin, your carbohydrates, you should see that waistline, whether it's a couple belt sizes or a new pair of pants. So visually, they're going to see that. If they're diabetic or they go for regular blood work, whether they're checking their own, they should see a reduction in their fasted morning blood sugars. So if somebody's pre-diabetic or diabetic, they might see very quickly, you can see those blood sugars in the morning recede. If they go for blood work, they might see if their doctor is competent, they might be testing for what's called a fasted insulin level. So they can see these fasted insulin levels start to recede down, which is extremely beneficial and good for health. And these highs and lows, Nick, really zap most people's energy.
Yeah.
So they might start to see over time, a couple of weeks, that they have more consistent energy throughout the day because their insulin is coming down and they're not getting these bang ups. You know, remember, that's the whole thing. What goes up must come down. So if you really drive up the insulin and blood sugar through carbohydrates, it's going to come crashing down at some point. So you have more even energy. And a lot of times people will even say, hey, you know, I don't need that morning nap, that afternoon nap anymore. So these are all like little tiny things, visually, blood work, that you can start to, and actually, you know what happens too, Nick? Weirdly enough, as people curtail their carbohydrates and manage them appropriately, they actually crave carbohydrates less sometimes, done properly, provided they're not too restrictive, because their blood sugars, a lot of times it's not the carbohydrates they're chasing, Nick. It's the blood sugar highs and the lows. The lows get us. And how do you bring yourself up? You eat more carbs. So when people are managing that and they're getting enough fiber and they're getting enough cardio and they're getting enough strength training and enough protein, they get this. They don't get these big whacks. And over time, they're like, wow, I don't know. I'm not exhausted all the time. You were never really exhausted. Your body was exhausted from the highs and lows, and now you're nice and even. So that's another thing people can look for is, how are their energy levels? Now, if somebody's being super restrictive and they're just fucking tanked all the time and they're exhausted all the time, and before they started the carb cycling, Nick, they felt pretty decent, well, this is a sign that you're being too restrictive and you need more. Your body will let you know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's all I got. I think carb cycling, it's very interesting. I'll probably try it for the next couple weeks, just see kind of what results I get out of it.
Okay.
I would recommend that our viewers, if they get an okay from their doctor, they should try it. This could be really beneficial to people in terms of energy levels, weight loss, obviously all the things you just talked about.
I think it's a win-win across the board, as long as you look for the signs, Nick, of this is too restrictive. Like we said, cold extremities, lethargy, which is exhaustion,
Yep.
constipation, not recovering from your training, constant carbohydrate, just thinking about carbs all the time. And there's no downside to it. And guess what? If it doesn't work, you just eat carbs back and put back in your diet. There's no way that it can't work.
Well, you're not going to do any long-term damage.
No. Okay. As long as you just don't go, in my mind, especially if you're somebody who's exercising on a regular basis, there's no real reason, or I don't think there's any upside to Nick to not at least cycling it on the 7th day.
Right.
That's going to be the most, like, there's been times where
that's at the extreme end.
Yeah, I think that because I've tried, all the stuff that we're teaching people, Nick, it came from somewhere. It was all trial and error for me. Not to say I hadn't learned some stuff from other people and implemented, but a lot of stuff at this point in my career, it's all self-taught. I've had times where I really wanted to be like super ripped, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go low carb for 2 weeks. Well, by the second week, my body and my performance looked like complete shit.
Yeah.
It was just too restrictive for too long. So I would say that that's something to look forward to. Don't push it past 7 days. If you can go past 7 days, you're not training hard enough.
No.
You're not depleting. You're not trying. If you're not like white knuckling it by day 6, you're being a wimp. You need to sprint harder, lift more volume, have sex more often. Like you're not bringing it, man. You should really, like, if I'm on day 6, Nick, you should look like a bowl of pasta to me right now.
You're dying for it.
It's a great strategy. It's a great topic that you brought up today, and I think that everybody should give it a shot.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, let us know in the comments if you're thinking about trying this, if it's something you've done in the past and had success with, or if you do try it, let us know how it goes after the first week or two. Hopefully everybody got a little bit of good information out of this episode. I know I did.
If we missed anything on carbohydrate cycling that, we didn't think of, Nick, drop a comment below, ask a question, and we can maybe address it in our Q&As. We're going to be doing these Q&A videos probably every couple of weeks, right? Once a month.
Try to get once every month or two, we'll do a Q&A video.
Yeah. So if we missed anything, I think we covered a lot of ground here. But if you disagree, if you have other questions, leave below and pass along to anybody you know that wants to be lean, muscular, energetic.
Feel great.
Yeah.
Look great.
Improve diabetes. Diabetes is a huge thing. Great strategy for people that are diabetic, pre-diabetic. So that's it, guys. And we thank you very much. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Have a great day.
Please hit the like, subscribe, and hit that bell notification so you don't miss any content in the future.